Hello everyone, welcome back to Communities Unite, where it's a really cool series where we're joined by people from America and UK, where we'll be speaking about the differences from UK and America with autism. So I'm going to ask everyone to introduce themselves in order I see on Zoom. So if anyone is offended, maybe you're last or you're not second or third or fourth. I'm sorry about that. Not my fault, blame Zoom. So Finn, you're first, so you might introduce yourself.
Yes, hello, I'm Finn. I'm an autistic speaker and YouTuber. Well, I say YouTuber, I don't really upload at the moment. We're getting around to it, we're getting there. And apparently a boxer as well nowadays. So yeah.
Yeah, I saw about your upcoming fight. I wish you all the best of luck.
Oh, thank you. Very exciting.
Yeah, because we last spoke in January, didn't we? Like the episode we've done before.
Yeah, it was a while ago now.
Yeah, so it's been a while. So it's great to have you back.
But yeah, no, it's good to be back. Thank you.
Yeah, I know you know, like says it as well. So you, at least you know someone apart from me.
Yeah, I've met Mark as well. I've met Mark.
Oh yeah, you met Mark. I didn't
Yeah.
know you know Mark. So you've met Mark as well. So
Yeah.
that's good. You know a couple here. Maddy, if you mind introducing yourself.
Hi, everyone. So my name is Maddy, or Madeline. I am a freshman at Berkeley City College. So I'm a full-time student, and I have a really big passion for biology and disability rights advocacy. I've spoken on several podcasts, and I just overall want to help educate people from a scientific perspective on kinds of learning conditions and whatnot.
Yeah, and I think it's great what you are doing as well, Maddie, because like we've spoke about a lot of stuff on that last one we did, which wasn't too long ago. It was about maybe a few weeks, so it's great to have you back, and we can, and you can meet everyone. So Says, would you mind introducing yourself? Off mute.
I always do this. I always think I'm on mute, but I'm not mute. Silly me, my brain's not working. So anyway, hi everyone. My name is Sez, and I am an autistic content creator. I don't say YouTuber, I say content creator for some reason. And I also have epilepsy, and I upload content on autism and epilepsy, but I'm not doing that at the moment because I'm currently running a history channel called History Inside a Nutshell, which has just been launched. But then also I run a podcast, and I'm also into history, and I'm currently training to be a swimming teacher.
Yeah, that is really awesome. A lot of, well, thanks, Says. Yeah, so it's great to have you back because it wasn't that we didn't do an episode too long ago. If I get my words out.
Oh no, I understand completely, Mason.
Yeah. It's not nerves, it's just I can't get a certain word out sometimes. So there we go.
Oh no, it's perfectly understandable.
Yeah. Anyone laughing? Okay. if anyone's laughing who's watching, you can laugh. I don't mind. So Jaqueline, would you mind introducing yourself, please?
Hello, I'm Jaqueline City, and I am a fashion designer. I own a label called Jaqueline City Apparel, and I do things like New York Fashion Week, and disability inclusion is a really big part of the brand, where I try to have a lot of disabled models because I myself not only am autistic, but I have invisible illnesses such as dysautonomia and from a traumatic brain injury. So that's what I do.
Yeah, well, thank you for coming back, Jaqueline, because we only did an episode last week, didn't we? So yeah, we haven't seen, it's not long ago since we did one, so thank you for coming back, and we'll definitely touch on everything what everyone has said once everyone's been introduced. So Mark, you might introduce yourself, please.
Yes, my name is Mark SW. I'm autistic and I'm also dyslexic. I'm a YouTuber and I upload all kinds of videos. I do a variety. I've done collaborations with Sez and Mason, and I am a massive Jerry Anderson fan, the man who created many sci-fi TV shows such as Thunderbirds, Captain Scarlet, and Space 1999. But I also dabble in classic Doctor Who.
Yeah, because it's great to have you back, Mark, because like I've said to most people here, it wasn't long since we did one together. But yeah, it would have been the Doctor Who series, which wasn't long ago. But yeah, as I say every time, Mark, I love the spacey background. Which I'm sure everyone else here probably can agree. Well, I'm not gonna say probably will agree. But as you can see, my background is the same as every time. The only exception is I've got a World Cup chart because the World Cup is coming soon. So, or when it's aired, the World Cup is probably started. So, which is cool. But today's not about football because I don't think everyone's interested in that today. But right, so with autism, which you guys can be off mute if you want, but you can stay on mute if you want. It's up to you. But so I'm gonna go with anyone. Like I think maybe we start with the UK guys, and then we can go on to America. So anyone from the UK, what do you think of the autism kind of system, like in general?
Well,
Wow.
in my opinion, so far I've. Oh, sorry.
No, go on, Mark. Go on. You go first.
As far as I know, it seems to be okay, and I think as sort of time goes on, I think it gets even better and better. It certainly did for me as I moved on in education.
Okay. That is yeah, because we all have like different experiences, don't we? So it's good that you had a good experience like in like school and everything, Mark. Yeah. Says what about you? What are you gonna say?
Well, I was going to say it's probably up and down at the moment. I mean, it's been like not so great to begin with, but you have to compare with like 15 to 20 years ago. But now it's improving a little bit, but not as much, especially within the employment part, because it's growing up a little bit really because as of 2022 the employment rate for people who have autism to come in to do different kinds of employment is now at 29% as at the recording. But I think from what I heard through other people, it's a bit of a balance, but it's a bit of an uncertain balance because you just don't know what's really happening. And I mean, anywhere could be not so perfect, really. But I just think even though people are trying and companies are trying, more needs to be done.
Yeah, I completely agree with you, Says. Especially in the educational system, I would say that does need some parts need improving, but it's good that we're hearing everyone's opinion. So I'll go to you, Finn. If you have, do you have anything to add on what Marcus
Yeah,
says?
I mean, I guess for my experiences, well, taking it all the way back to school and education, I never myself wanted any sort of, I don't know, support throughout school, or I didn't want to go to a specialist school or anything. I kind of wanted just to fit in with everything, with everyone else, which I kind of, you can kind of link that into masking and that kind of thing. So throughout school, for me, it was a bit of an up and down experience, because of course the mainstream school isn't fully adapted to all the needs of an autistic person. But I chose to stay in a mainstream school, so I've kind of got to suffer with the consequences of that. It was up to me. But yeah, throughout school, up and down, but you can't really expect anything different. I'm sure I'd have a totally different experience if I did go to a specialist school or even just a different mainstream school. It depends on where you are. And that leads on to employment as well. Like Said, it's definitely improved over the years. I mean, I'm not sure if I'm allowed to talk about it too much at the moment, but I am currently going through an early employment stage with a company that's specifically looking to recruit more autistic people and being more inclusive. I'm sure I'll speak more about that in the future. So yeah, it's definitely improving, and day by day we're learning a bit more and people are becoming a bit more accepting. So yeah, I mean, I guess you could say it's a bit all over the place, but it's slowly and surely improving.
Yeah, Yeah, like I agree, and like people like us who are like talking about autism and want to raise concerns or stuff like that, and um yeah, stuff needs to be done, but like you say, it's a personal choice whether you want to go to mainstream or maybe special education, um, which I think we'll get into that more in a bit later on. But says just quickly before we move on to America, you put your hand up. Is there anything else you wanted to add?
Well, yeah, because what Finn said about education was really quite surprising because this is the main thing. Because with mainstream education, and I know I'll probably go into depth with that later on, but with mainstream education, it doesn't always become a choice. It always becomes as a, oh, it's a must thing because this school is closer, and still you will get like bad experiences with it, really. So it's not just about choice, really. And I don't mean to criticize you, Finn, I'm sorry, but this is just something just to people always have to bear in mind, and parents always have to bear in mind as well. But again, I'll go into it later on.
Okay, yeah. Um,
I just wanted to say to that, don't worry about disagreeing with it. It's fine, you know. Whereas with me, I might have I don't actually know if I had the choice or not. This is a while ago now. I feel like if I felt the need to go to a specialist school, I possibly would have had that option. I'm not 100% sure, but I know it's not an option to everyone. Which is why it can, you know, all to do with location, whether you can actually access these places or not. But yeah, that's what I mean. Like, it's a completely different experience for everyone, I guess.
Yeah, yeah, like you say, so some people are gonna like mainstream, some people might not even like a school where a lot of people with autism are. They might just want to be so somewhere like that. So it's like personal choice. So I'm gonna go to America. I'm not virtually like, you know what I mean. I'm not gonna go on a plane to America, but I'm gonna go to Jaqueline. If you want to maybe add anything from maybe America point of view.
Well, there are a few things that I would touch on, and I would argue that it may be more difficult in America, the whole autistic experience, because of how big America is. It's very spread out, so it's harder to reach a specialist, and our healthcare system is obviously, I don't think any of us would argue that it's going to be worse than the UK's, because a lot of us don't have access to healthcare or insurance, which then having a specialist, like someone who specializes in autism, is very rare. So the experience, even just getting diagnosed may be more difficult. A lot of women, especially in America, don't get diagnosed until adulthood, like I did. So I wouldn't have the experience of growing up in the autistic program, but I did have experience growing up in the gifted program, which they're now discovering that most of the gifted kids would have some form of autism or a lot of learning disabilities, and that they were just as much like special education children as the special ed classes in America. And at least that's being fixed and more attention's being brought on that. So, but I can't speak on that because now I'm not actively in school. But I think those are two big things, big topics. It would be the lack of health insurance and how spread out, because you could drive up to 10 hours and still be in the same state. So when you're trying to reach those specialists that can diagnose you or can get you the right testing or the right accommodations, it could be hours away.
Yeah, yeah, that is that. Yeah, yeah. It's not great, is it? There because like I see Maddy, you're agreeing there. Do you have anything like to add to that?
Yes. So one of the things that I've noticed as someone who is still a full-time student is the fact that our entire school system, even in the special ed places, even I was fortunate enough to have the opportunity to go to a private school. Autism was still heavily stigmatized and was heavily seen as something that either wasn't treatable or wasn't manageable and was just something that I had to figure out on my own. There were accommodations for, ADHD, so I had that. There were accommodations for depression, which in all sorts of situations in terms of disabilities, America is not helping disabled students as much as they should. But I would say particularly with autism, you are either put into the group of quote unquote high functioning or quote unquote low functioning. People who are considered high functioning or gifted, who might not have any severe complications in school and doing mainstream academics, they're immediately fixated on, sometimes in a way glorified in an unrealistic light. And this causes a lot of issues going forward. So people will expect a lot from you, and then they'll basically blow up at you when you don't meet those expectations, because they're expecting you to be a normal person with an added level of intelligence, and that's simply not true. Whereas if you are non-communicating, if you don't have the ability to appear like you're able-bodied, oftentimes the employment rate is, as other people have mentioned, just extremely terrible. And when you say the word autism in America, I was 13 when I was diagnosed, and I told one friend in my middle school. Other people heard me around and started avoiding me for the rest of the year. So that it just comes to show that, like, either that or you get the, oh, I didn't think you don't act autistic. It's like, what, am I supposed to act a certain way to please you? No. So just the harmful stigma that's put on to other people on top of the discrepancies and on top of the, ableism that people face in the entire world, you have that added stigma that continuously pushes you into that system.
Yeah, it seems it's really tricky, like as you say, like having to hide autism because people are avoiding you and stuff like that. And you mentioned that high functioning and low functioning, which we'll get into that as well a bit later on as well, because I do want to talk about that, what people think about high functioning and low functioning, if they agree with it. Mark, I saw you had your hand up.
Yeah, I was just going to say, I do agree with what Maddy actually said, especially with employment, because these days I've sort of discovered that if you want a job, you've got to be good at everything, and that's not fair. And one of them includes good communication skills, even though you may be applying for a job that may not require communications. If it's just like, well, just watering flowers, for example, nice simple job, all you just do is pouring water on flowers. Where would communication be needed? It's just weird.
Yeah, I completely agree. Yeah, because like there's a massive stigma, isn't there, out there about needing to be good at these certain things, like for example, maybe algebra. You have to like in school, as most of us can remember, the ones who more so, Maddy will probably have more of a sense than us older guys here. But like algebra was one of those things that was really focused on in maths, when that's only about not many jobs, if I'm correct, like it's more maybe science, maybe, or so certain things like that require that, when like you have to pass high in your exams to get quite a lot of jobs. Yeah. But with going back to high functioning, low functioning, what are people's opinions on that? Do you think that should be like a term, or do you think that undermines being autistic? What do you think? That's to anyone. It says, yeah.
Okay. Sorry, Mason. I'm still trying to work out the buttons. But I had this discussion with another friend of mine the other day about this week, and we had this really interesting conversation. And this was something that was interesting because we actually went on, I wouldn't say a debate, but just like a discussion. Some of it got controversial, some of it have got like into a disagreement, but an assertive disagreement, if that makes sense. But it was interesting because he thought that, and I won't say names really, just because I want to protect people from privacy and all of that, but he said that some of the names are kind of like insults, and they are insults because you're just like labeling a person as a form of a stigma rather than anything else. So say for example, if you have like an object in your hand, then it just classifies as an object, since like there's a cup, or if there's a bottle that's labeled something like spaghetti bolognese. So that's kind of like the thing, really. People just see it as like autism as labels more than anything, but in truth there are many things that have like loads of labels at them, and people can get like very like it's a difficult word to explain, but they can be a little bit high and low about it. And it's the same things with when you classify things with or what people do to help and support autistic students, such as special ed in America, or here in the UK we call it learning support, or special educational needs, or SEN. Again, that's kind of like the same thing, but it's just the labels, and that's why people think they might find it very insulting or just confusing. So I would probably think it's very debatable, really, and that's just what I think it might be, but everyone has different opinions on this.
Yeah, I think we're getting all these opinions around now, I've said so. Well, thank you. Jaqueline?
Hello. My sound's going in and out, so hopefully you guys can hear me. But I was just debating someone about who uses the term Asperger's still. And I was saying how I kind of find it offensive for someone to use the term Asperger. I'm just an Aspie. I don't have autism or say something to that effect, because it seems like it's an elitist form of autism. Like, oh, I have the good autism. Oh, I can mask. And it just seems to be putting down those people who may have a harder time. And I just don't think it's fair to use the higher or lower functioning labels, especially calling someone lower functioning, because there are so many people that were, even Albert Einstein would have been nonverbal until the age of like 12, if you can fact check me, but he would have been considered low functioning as a child, and we know him to be one of the greatest minds that ever lived. So I think it can really hinder, but if we're talking about in a school setting, there are kids that need more I think it needs to be a very more like individualistic learning experience, and just focus on what their particular needs and their particular accommodations that the person with autism needs, because there is no such thing as just high functioning, like you excel in every subject, or low functioning where you have trouble in every single subject. We all have these subjects that we're really great at, or special interests that we're really great at. Like one of your special interests may be math, and you're really bad at science. And why can't we just get those accommodations in your science class, where it's hard for you to pay attention, it's hard for you to have interest, or it's maybe more sensory, that classroom. And I think it needs to be more of an individualistic approach to not just autism, but disability in general, rather than just grouping them all together like we're at two sides of a spectrum. We're all usually somewhere in the middle. So
Yeah, I completely agree what you're saying. And I think like high functioning, low functioning is another simple turn as saying you're smart and you're dumb, which it shouldn't be that way. And early in this year, I spoke to someone from Finland, and they don't use those terms there, and I think it should be like everywhere. Like people have like as Jackson said, in a school setting that maybe seen a different way, but maybe after school it's going to be a lot harder to use those terms, and it should be. Maddy?
So the term Asperger's was actually removed from the I think it was like DMS or whatever that book is that classifies
DSM-5.
disabilities. Yeah.
DSM.
So that was removed in 2012, and since then it's been really just said like you're on the spectrum. So not only is that word offensive, but it's also medically inaccurate nowadays, and it's also way outdated. But I think what happens with the terms high and low functioning is they were really created by people who A, did not have autism, and B, it was mainly a way of labeling people how useful they would be in our society in certain jobs where they required them. For instance, I was always told, as when I was 13, when I was diagnosed, that I was high functioning because I excelled in biological sciences. That was my niche. And because so many people value being a doctor or a scientist as something, they see that as such a accredited credential. They see that as something that makes a person intelligent. I was automatically expected to act smart, or be in all of these classes, be in all of these, and basically have all of these expectations. And that all comes from a form of stigma around our society and being, oh, this person's high functioning because they are useful to us. Whereas, oh, this person can't communicate with us. They're not useful, so they're low functioning. And, as I think other people have mentioned before, it is true that there isn't really an objective definition for what smart or what dumb is. So you can't really label a person smart or dumb just because they may experience certain things, or maybe verbal, maybe not. There's really no way to objectively define those things. And it's really awful how people are just thrown into these boxes for the sake of able-bodied people trying to see who's going to benefit them, what's going to work for their companies, what's going to work for their jobs, and not seeing people. So I really do agree with Jaqueline's point in that we need to be more equitable when it comes to our education system and evaluate people in a holistic way so that we can have the best approach for them when it comes to what they need in a classroom setting.
Yeah, I completely agree. I'm sure I'm sure everyone does as well, Maddy, because it's some really good points, and even I'm learning some stuff as well. So, and I also think maybe I see with like high and low is, like, in my experience, it was used quite a lot in special educational, not as much in a mainstream, which I found, because like, going to Finn, when used in mainstream, was high and low used at all?
Right, well, I am gonna apologize in advance because I probably will end up going on a massive tangent about this, just because it's a topic I'm quite passionate about. But clinically diagnosed at 7, I was straight away labeled as being high functioning, which you would kind of back then think links to your capability, not just for our education, but for our everyday life. But because, I was progressing through school at the same speed as a neurotypical child, if not, an above average neurotypical child, they were like, okay, seems pretty capable throughout life and seems pretty capable over, or in education, must be high functioning. So, seems pretty good. I'm happy because it's a phrase that's being used less over recent years, even if it is still being used quite a lot. Like, I do hear it every now and then, but that's probably also because I'm surrounding myself with more neurodivergent people, so I'm starting to hear it a lot less anyway. But yeah, I think the whole idea of being high functioning and low functioning takes us back to the idea of having a spectrum where you can be less autistic and more autistic, right? Where people say, or like having a spectrum would imply that everyone is somewhere along that spectrum. If you can be less or more autistic, with the, I don't know, let's say the high functioning people would be lower on the spectrum, low functioning being higher on the spectrum. It's complicated, but it's just not really a idea that works anymore, because I'm sure we've all realized that not everyone is autistic. So not everyone would be somewhere along that spectrum. So just because the so-called low functioning autistic people display particular traits that make them seem in a certain eye less capable throughout society, it's not looked at for a proper way. But yeah, sorry, linking back, yes, it was used in my school to label me. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, because I'm in a way that's not on the experience and all that, and like getting labelled like that, because no one should be like we said before. It's just another time for being clever and dumb, and no one is clever or dumb. Like, we're clever at certain things. We're maybe not as smart as someone else, but that doesn't mean we're dumb. But yeah, just before I go to Mark, just as I see in the chat, like a mainstream school is a word in the UK for basically a public school, which is used in America. For anyone in America wondering what we're meaning by mainstream, it's basically just public in a UK setting. If anyone was confused. So Mark, over to you.
Yes, well, as far as I know, when I was at school, both primary and secondary, they didn't have this sort of like high and low system. And personally, I quite find it offensive. It's kind of like that Doctor Who episode, Daleks in Manhattan. You know, when they sorted out the humans, high intelligence, low intelligence,
Oh, yeah.
low intelligence get turned into pig slaves, and that just wasn't fair.
That's it.
So it's kind of like that in a way, and because I know, because nobody's perfect, like people said, and Einstein was autistic and he won the Nobel Prize, and I think even Newton was autistic as well. But because nobody's perfect at everything. Because when I was at secondary school, in my first year, I had to take French lessons. It's sort of like a tradition; everyone has to do like a language course. But after my first year, it was determined that I was rubbish at French. I just struggled too much. It was way too difficult. So they decided that for the next 2 years, instead of learning French, I could come out of my lessons and spend my time practicing my reading and writing. As I mentioned, I'm dyslexic, but also develop my typing skills. And it was from that they realized that I work much better on a computer than I do with pen and paper. So yes, computers I can do, pen and paper I can't do, which was why when I did my exams, we tried to convince them to allow me to use a computer to type up all the long answers. Of course, turn off spell checker and the internet so I can't cheat, but at least I could get more down than I would do if I was handwriting my answers.
Yeah, I completely agree. And like when I was at school, seems like ages ago now, but I would be kind of like, you know, kind of trapped in a way where you do maybe a task, let's say maths for example, and everyone in the class knew what they were doing, and yeah, they knew what they were doing, and I had no clue, and I wouldn't say for help to a teacher. I would do it, because in the past I would have situations where a teacher would say to me, "Do you need any help, Mason?" And I would say, I'd say, "Yeah, I did help," and then you ask for it, and then the teacher says, "Just try again one more time," and it's always that one more time that goes on, and then they don't help you in the end. Did anyone else have that experience at school or currently for you, Maddy?
Yeah, definitely. That was something that I dealt with a lot in school, where one teacher even said at one point when I was in 6th grade that I was incapable of learning math any farther than a 6th grade level. She said that to me because her teaching style did not work for me, because I would come to her with questions and say, "Hey, I need you to, review this with me." And she would refuse to do that because she had other students to deal with. And that's what she told my parents. And needless to say, they were both very upset at the teacher, but also me. And clearly, considering the fact that I'm a bio major and the fact that I'm in calculus and doing fine, that's clearly not the case. So, it just goes to show that allowing students to have access to different types of learning styles from teachers really helps. And having teachers that don't label your children as not being able to do something without considering any other alternatives.
Yeah, I'm sorry you had to go through that, and it's dreadful. And I think personally, I think some teachers are just lazy and they can't be asked to do it, so they just say do it yourself or fail or fail whatever you're doing, because let's face it, human race is quite selfish. Says.
Okay. Well, unlike Maddie's one, it's almost like quite the opposite, because when I was in both primary and secondary school, I noticed that there was massive big differences between them. In primary school, I was like 1 out of 2 children that had like as they would term it, special educational needs, and but the other student was autistic like me. But my primary school didn't really have the facilities, especially since they were a mainstream. They didn't have like a department or anything like that just for those who need extra support and all of that. And the only time that did happen in the primary school was either in a storage cupboard where you have like an access to room, but you're in this tiny storage cupboard, or if I just needed one-to-one in my class and they were doing something else, my class were doing something else while I had to go away and learn how to like read or write or copy, I always used to have like a special desk, but it was always in the same classroom, but it was always next to the toilets. And you can imagine the terrible stench in that did happen, and I could see Mark's expression from that. But in secondary school, it was very different because they did have like proper access, and my mainstream secondary school was like a religious school, but they had like a perfect place to actually have a good environment for their students. They even had like 2 levels because it used to be a nuns dormitory, and they used to have like 2 rooms which were perfect for us. But the only downside to that was that when you have like one-to-ones, except when in my primary school I only had like one main one, for the one-to-ones we had about 5 to 6 different individuals teachers per day, and for different lessons. And yeah, it was like quite hard really, especially with different subjects that they have to focus on. But they do get a bit frustrated, but there were some who were really, really like patient, and then there were others who got a little bit frustrated. But it wasn't like my fault really, but I just didn't really think anything of it, and then nothing worried me about too much. But I was really, really worried about asking a question, because when the support teachers get a bit frustrated with me, or if they actually don't know if they wanted to what's the word I'm looking for, just to interact thing, if I didn't get a question right on the spot, they'll be like no, like multiple times until I get a right answer, and I felt like I was pressured to say yes, and that became like a trauma, because I know I was afraid to speak up myself, but by the way, I never told my parents this. I never told anyone this until now. So yeah, so it was really quite like pressurizing and traumatizing, and it kind of in a way it's probably scarred me a little bit, but I'm trying to like get over that now, especially since I'm training to be like the swimming teacher, and the students I'm assisting with all have different like needs, including Down syndrome and autism, and it's just really trying to get out of that comfort shell in order to help and support the children to go through experiences that I went through, but I don't want them to have, really, because that's the thing you want. Even if you don't have the right things that you had in your generation, what about the future generation? What do they actually have, or do they actually want?
Yeah. I'm sorry I had to go through that. Like with the asking questions and you feeling pressured, like to say no, they wait for a correct answer. That's definitely not on. I had a similar situation. When I was in primary school, it was the strictest teacher of the whole school. And my brother actually, my brother's older than me. And it was quite funny because my brother's in his 30s, I'm in my 20s, and he had exactly the same teacher as me in the same year. And she was there she was like a god, you know. She was like there for like a lifetime. But there was a situation where I got told they called it timeout in primary school. I'm not sure if they still call it timeout. If you do something wrong, you get timeout at break or lunch. Where I know later in education they call that detention over here in the UK. So what happened was it's a similar situation to you says, but they didn't say no. Every time they said that, what they said was if you've got 5 chances, they would count down every time I said something to answer. I think it was a times table, so I had to do a times table thing, and the teacher was like 5, 4, 3, much faster than that, and it's very crazy. And yeah, that's just a little story there, which it isn't very nice. And funny enough, I went on a trip to Covent Gardens. People in the UK, you'll know, you should know where Covent Gardens is. I went for a little trip, and funny enough, that teacher was on the bus. I didn't speak to her once. I said hi and goodbye. If she remembered me. I hope she. Yeah, but yeah. From that, we'll go on to you, Mark. Do you have what do you want to say?
Yes, primary school is usually the worst for an autistic person, especially with me, because not only did my school didn't have the facilities, but the teachers there, they didn't have any understanding about autism. They just assumed it's some kind of behavioral problem, which that was just unfair. And when I got into secondary school, some of the teachers they were better understanding. So like for example, during like science classes, I was always put with the the noisy lot, the ones with no ambitions who just want to mess about. So with me, I was allowed to come out of those noisy classes and go and work in the library. I got some peace and quiet. But with some of the teachers, some of them did understand autism, but some of them didn't. And I sometimes ended up with teachers who I thought were a bit unfair. Like, you know, if one person in your class screws up, then the whole class is in detention. And I'm like, why should I go in detention? I mean, what did I do? I'm just sitting here minding my own business, doing what I'm supposed to do at school, doing the work, and I still get punished. And I complained about this to my mom about one of my English teachers, and she was also my brother's teacher, and he liked her. I didn't. But then one time, both my mum and my brother went to a theatre play, and they saw my English teacher. So my brother John, he recognised her, introduced her to my mum, and my mum told her that about how I didn't like her, how she kept punishing me for just doing the work, which has been unfair. And she told her about my autism. And then the next day she saw me, she sort of apologized, saying, I'm really sorry, Mark, I didn't know that you need the special needs. So since then she started to be more understandable. But it's just one of the things. But I think it's like what Says mentioned, that I don't think the younger generation should go through what we went through. It does need to change so they can have a better life at school, because some people say it's the bullies that are really a problem at school, but it's not just the bullies, it's also the teachers. They need to understand how life is difficult for an autistic child.
Yeah, I completely agree with what you're saying, and especially like if you're a good student, you like in group settings and stuff like that, in group work, you're most likely put with a person that's maybe disrupts the class on purpose, and like you're saying, Mark, it's not good, and especially in primary school, and like if someone does something wrong, like you say, everyone has to put up with it as well, which is wrong. It is it's I experienced that in my time in mainstream school as well. The what happened was, I don't know, someone said something in the form, and then the teacher went mental, which like a teacher shouldn't be doing, more like a boxer. Things like you should be doing in a boxing match, not in a class. Um, but yeah, it's not on, and like I think like Mark said, a lot of things should be changing. I want to say, like Says mentioned about toilets before, and I want to talk about that. I want to talk about like, did anyone, let's say you're having a class in school. It might be early education like primary, or might have been later. I think it's all the same situation with this. Like, did anyone ask to use the toilet during a class, and then you get told, what, don't matter when it is, you get told, can't you wait till lunch, or can't you wait till break? But did anyone have that situation?
You know what? That has brought back a very, very distant memory of mine that I've completely forgot I had. This always happened in school, as I'm sure it did with pretty much anyone in existence that's ever been to school before, where you get told, oh, you asked to go to the toilet, and you're like, no. The teacher's like, no, you can't go, you got to wait. You could have gone 5 minutes ago, all of that kind of stuff. And it got to a point in primary school where I was fed up of this. And I literally thought this even happened until you mentioned it then. But I went home to my mum and I was like, look, mum, this needs sorting out. This can't be happening. I need to go to a toilet when I need to go to a toilet. And I remember I can't remember whether she told my teacher or whether she told me to like kind of confront my teacher about it. But I remember her saying, like, you've got to let your teacher know that, when you need to go to the toilet, you go to the toilet. Otherwise, just walk out anyway, if they say no. So I was like, okay, that's great. From that point onwards, I seem to not remember the teacher ever having a problem with it again. So that was all sorted.
Yeah, that's definitely not on, because yeah, the bathroom situation, because like it's not that, like, you maybe spot in during a class a teacher go out, and they probably go loo, or because or something. They don't have to ask, but we do. And I understand in parts, because some teachers may think you're just going for the sake of it, but if they know the student, they'll know that you're just going for the pure reason you go for a toilet. You're not going in to mess about, take the toilet roll and pretend you're playing like a game, or like who can get the most toilet roll wins. You're not doing that. It's very different. But yeah, I remember the toilet wasn't. It was a bad situation. Jaqueline.
In American private schools, we're not even allowed to ask to go to the bathroom. We take trips like as a class. And if your teacher's really strict, even if you raise your hand and like say you really have to go to the bathroom or you're feeling sick or anything, they'll shut your hand down and tell you to pay attention, or you get your desk moved out into the hallway one time. So I wasn't even like with the class. I had to learn from outside, which is like, how can you learn with your class? Also, one girl was so afraid to ask to go to the bathroom, but she really had to, so she peed her pants like a lot, and that happened like as middle schoolers. Like this was just a thing that happened. And I have PTSD from it because my teachers were so strict. They didn't let us do anything. Like if you didn't know the answer to a question, or you were like popcorn readers, what we call it in America, I don't know what you would call it in the UK, but it's where you finish a sentence and then you like call on the next person to keep reading, like whatever the story is. So that's popcorn reading in America. But we would call on the next person. If you didn't know where we were, you would get your desk moved out, or we get your desk moved to the front where the teacher's desk was, and you would have to sit there until you figured out where we were for reading or the answer to the question. And if you didn't, you would cry up there until lunchtime. And also, the dismissal didn't let you go for lunch. The teacher did. So sometimes we wouldn't even get to go to lunch. And by the time I went to the lunchroom, hot lunch was done and I wouldn't be able to eat. So I'm gonna cry now. But like my PTSD will come up from all this stuff with school. But I think that has a lot to do with why I didn't get diagnosed, because I just became such a quiet kid who tried to stick to the rules, not be a problem, and just do my work. But then if you're doing all your work correctly, you're the one who's teaching the other kids. So I was the one who had to go to the front of the class and teach the kids, because the teacher's abusive to all the kids, so somebody's got to be the one-on-one tutor. So all of the highly gifted kids are then the teachers that were not being paid to be the tutors and the teachers. So it's a fun one, guys. And we also have to clean the classroom. Like even we take our desks outside and like hose them down. Like, and we're paying thousands of dollars to do this. Like it makes no sense. And this is private school. Like this is supposed to be the best option. I don't even know what to say.
Yeah, thank you for sharing that, Jack. And that's awful. Like you even have to clean up your own desk when people get paid for doing that. Like you say, like it's a person's job. What did the staff members? Did they just go home and say the students have to do that? That is very wrong. And yeah, like as we're saying, different situations from a private school from the UK and America for sure, because over in America it feels like a dump, where in UK it may be a bit more easier. But yeah, like going back to that toilet situation, it's awful. Like you can't even go. Like you have to go in trips, which is awful. And how strict they are is. It just reminds me going back to the dark ages, like years ago, which it shouldn't be the case now. We're in 2022, and we want changes made, especially in America as well, because it's big, and like you say, yeah. Sorry to hear that, Jaqueline, and thanks for sharing, because it must have been hard to share that. Mark.
Yeah, I was just surprised by Jaqueline's story. It actually sounds like American schools are more like a dictatorship, which is just wrong.
Yeah, it seems that way, I think. Maddy?
It's funny because everyone in America who loves this country calls it the land of the free. We can't even go to the bathroom. Like, it's just, I mean, I had a not as strict experience as Jaqueline, and I'm very sorry that you had to go through that. We had a similar thing where we had a lanyard, so only 1 to 2 people at a time could use the bathroom, even though there's obviously more than just one stall in there. So that was an issue because they thought that kids were going to fool around and play on their phones and whatnot. And they were more concerned with the kids doing that than if they actually had bodily needs and had to take care of those needs. And, you know, I think a lot of people don't realize, just from a scientific perspective, how bad that seems. I mean, a lot of people are like, so what? You just hold it in, right? Well, you can get a ton of infections from that. That is one of the biggest causes of UTIs, is holding your urine for too long. And those, if they spread up to your kidneys, are going to cause what's called urosepsis. That can be dangerous. So, and, you know, this is just like a kind of a TMI story, but I have had UTIs that went undetected due to depression and not taking care of myself, to the point where it did get to a kidney issue. And if I hadn't gotten treatment, I probably would have had a much more serious outcome. So that just goes to show, if teachers are enforcing that, and not just the teachers, but if they're being instructed to enforce that by, you know, higher up educators and our school systems, where they're putting, you know, this mainstream education that doesn't even work for everyone, that's supposed to make you productive. If they're putting that over the literal basic needs of a child, that's not a functional society.
Yeah, it just sounds. It sounds like I live in hell. It just really does. And like yeah, it's just really bad. Says.
I never thought I'm going to say this because I know that I've heard about lavatory passes, but from what I heard from Maddie and Jaqueline, and I'm so sorry it happened to you both, but I don't know about you, but that's just sick. That's really sick. And I never would say this. I just wanted to punch a wall through that. And I thought, how messed up is that? Like, it's really messed up. And then Jaqueline was saying in the chat, really, it's a bit like Matilda. That's a really good example of this because you're thinking about, you know, your kid with the kids, and you got Miss Trunchbull, and it just all adds up. And that's how things get dealt with real life. And it's just so awful. But I think with things like that, really, and especially with the American school system, it's so sick, and it's a WTF moment.
Yes, I agree, and like I think Matilda, Miss Trunchbull, for example, is a very good way of putting things there, because yeah, like it's awful. Like, we have human rights, don't we? And like you say, it's dangerous to go to the toilet, and it just goes down to your health, and it could make things worse. So yeah, I agree. Mark.
Yeah, I totally agree with Matilda. I mean, Trunchbull was a real bad guy, and even that scene in the movie where she says to Amanda, "Your mummy is a twit." I just feel like saying, "Yeah, well, your dad's fat." Just want to insult her back. I've always been rebellious. I've always believed in retaliation. If someone hurts you, it's only fair that you do something back to them. That's why whenever the teachers were being strict with me, as soon as their back was turned, I was like,
Yeah, I agree. Like earlier we spoke about bullies, and like getting bullied, it's a very hard situation, because me and Jaqueline were speaking about the other episode we did not long ago, and yeah, I'll go to you, Jaqueline, then.
Yeah, so I was actually like hit by my teacher over the head just for doing things like stepping out of line or things like that. So it's just like, I don't know. I'm sorry, I'm looking at everybody's faces. So it was just like, yeah, really bad. I think that led me to not be able to, I forgot where I was going with this, but not be able to get diagnosed because you don't get that one-on-one attention, and the attention you want to avoid getting any attention at all. So those school bullies are really nothing because you're used to being picked on by the teacher and becoming, I don't know, if I think people can just kind of detect autism because they're like, oh, this person's a little weird or off or different, that it just becomes like ostracizing. But instead the teachers tend to pick you out, like whether that is they think it's in a helpful way or they're trying to cause you like torment. But it was very traumatic for me, and I know I want to add something, but I forgot where I was going when I saw everybody's jaws drop.
I'm sure you'll be able to find it. But yeah, that is dreadful. Like getting hit by a book. I mean, like it just reminds me, like the cane, like kind of that stuff. Like, well, like it's assault. Like it literally is assault. And it's not very good. Like safeguarding either from teachers. Says.
Yeah, I was going to actually say, really, that was so awful for a teacher to do that, especially since they're the one that's responsible. I mean, it's kind of like really assault, which is not very good. And in the UK, if you ever get something like that, you could get sacked on the spot for that because their safeguarding rules are super strict. And I mean, I had to go through safeguarding training recently for my work, and you can't believe how so strict they are, and you have to be very careful about what you do and how you hold somebody, or how you could like communicate, because they're parents that are not going to be happy with this. And it's just really awful that a teacher would have the guts to do that. And I know that in one of the primary school experiences, there was a teacher, the only teacher I hated, and she was so awful towards the children. And she did like worst things as well, but I can't remember what they were really, because I don't remember. It was the other kids than me, really. But teachers shouldn't really be like that, because it is their responsibility. Because if they don't have the responsibility, why are they teachers in the first place?
Yeah, like we say, like you say, so it wouldn't happen like in the UK. Like it's just crazy. Jacqueline.
What I wanted to say before that I forgot was when that incident did happen, when I was hit over the head by my teacher, my mother actually became a volunteer at the school, specifically with my class, so that she would be present in the class from then on, because she could see how abusive the dynamic was. I wasn't able to be taken out of the class, but that was the best thing that we could come up with. So instead of my desk just being outside the classroom, me and my mom's desks were outside the classroom. And she just like helped me try to like stay afloat. But in turn, she tried to overcompensate. And she was inviting the teacher to like my birthday parties, my communion party. So I had to see my abuser just more. So it kind of backfired. It helped a little bit because I know she had the right intentions of trying to like make it a better dynamic for me, but instead I just had to be traumatized more, I think.
Yeah, that's bad. You know, like just to get invited to parties after getting hit by a book and being assaulted. That I think that mentally even that make it a whole lot kind of worse, because you don't want to be anywhere near this person that hit you on the book. Yeah, that's yeah. Maddie.
I think it's not just the teachers. The problem goes deeper than just the teachers. Where do you think these teachers learn that abusing children is okay? They were probably taught that themselves. We need to actually take a step. It's not just blaming the teachers. They're underpaid, they're underfunded. In private schools where they get salary, they also have a lot of protections, because that's the problem with private school is like our school is able to go mask optional. And as a result, 1 out of 5 kids in our school had COVID in the next month. So because our school was private, even though public schools were mandated to have masks on and their vaccinations, our school was not. So as a result, teachers were allowing students with disabilities, students with health conditions and everything like that to become sick just because of that. And that's just one example of how private schools have a little too much freedom, in the sense that they don't have enough regulations, whereas public schools are so underfunded and so underpaid that in either scenario, you're going to end up with people being abused. And, it's really just goes to show that our society really does allow that, or did in the past, of, corporal punishment, physically abusing children as a form of discipline. And scientifically speaking, there is studies to show that that does not at all lead to good discipline, let alone good mental health. And if you have something like autism, which all of us do here, that would further exacerbate the issues that we were facing.
Yeah, I completely agree with what you're saying, that it does go deeper than just blaming the teachers. I completely agree. Mark.
Yeah, I was just going to say that I think we're all in agreement that school is always the worst place for an autistic person, because when I was a kid, I always wanted to try and go on strike, but my mum wouldn't let me. She was saying, no, you've got to go, whether you like to or not. Because I know some people can apply for home education, but I've learned that the problem is sometimes if you're home educated, it's very difficult to get into the higher education, to go to college, university. So it's quite a difficult choice. So you choose home education, you're in a safe and comfortable environment to study, but just face that difficulty of going to higher education. Whereas if you do go into school and face all those difficulties, at least you get a chance. So, well, like I said, when I was in secondary school, some teachers were more understanding, and I was lucky to get a good opportunity because in secondary school, there was a course called Future Pathways, which was ideal for students who wanted to leave school after their 11th year. And what you could do is you could spend some time going to college. So in my 10th year at school, I would spend half a day at college. And then when I went to Leicester College, I just fell in love with it straight away because it had like the type of facilities that I'm into, because I'm into like filmmaking and visual arts. And it had a friendly environment. People were more understanding and helpful. And then in my 11th year at school, I could then spend a whole day at a college doing a course, which was great because the day they chose was a Friday. So I only did Monday to Thursday at school, then Friday go to college and miss all the lessons that I didn't like and do something more practical and fun. And there was an open evening, and when my mum saw the type of work that I was doing at the college, she was just amazed that it was more practical, and I did a lot more than I did when I was at school. So I think if schools had like the facilities and the resources that like a college or a university has, I think maybe an autistic child would be happy at school. It just depends on what resources they would face or they would need.
Yeah, I completely agree, Mark. Because it is very hard in school in general, and like going from school to college as well, and then uni, as you're saying. In the ideal world, it would be nice if there wasn't any assaults, which I didn't think I would hear that today. I was very surprised to hear like people been assaulted in a private school, especially when they have the most resources and like we said. But just going back to I think it was popcorn reading, I think Jaqueline said earlier. I want to go back to that because I want to know, does anyone feel like, because I had a different experience. So in mainstream, more so, I think it just depends on the teacher, really. That's teaching you how they like to do it. But so some people like to have it where like people have to read straight on, or the teacher just reads it all for you. Like, what are people's thoughts on that? Do you guys like it when you're like the teacher just reads it as a class, or do you like when you kind of picked on, like saying you've got to read that section and then pass it on to someone else?
Well, I guess I don't know. It's a bit of a weird one, just because I could read perfectly fine when I was in school and everything. Other than when I got picked on to read, I found it hard to socialize at the best of times around people I felt comfortable with, let alone reading this piece of text out to a class of 30, having to get every single word correct because we're trying to analyze it or whatever it is. So I found it much easier to listen, whether that was other students reading or whether that was the teacher reading or whatever. So I would much prefer it if it was just a teacher reading the whole time, because then I can properly process everything as I'm going along. Whereas if I'm reading a page or two, by myself, I have to read it at least a few times before I'm actually able to like, pick out what's going on, rather than just words going into my head and then coming out my mouth. Like it just doesn't process properly. So yeah, personally, I preferred it being read out by the teacher.
Yeah, I'm the same as well, Finn. It's like kind of multitasking, isn't it? If you're reading it as well, and you can't really concentrate on what's being read. I think it's when you're doing that by yourself, and like you say, have to read it a half dozen times before it sinks in. Mark?
Yeah, we didn't do this popcorn reading thing at my schools, but I remember though one time when I was at primary school, we were all like asked to choose a book and read it to the class. But with me, I decided to choose a book that I've sort of seen on TV, because way back when I was at school, you always showed the education programs, and usually there'd be one that would involve reading a story from an actual published book. And the one I liked the most was called Jesus' Christmas Party, sort of about the life of the innkeeper, and he's getting all these guests, so Mary and Joseph, the shepherds, the wise men. And because with me, I found out if I watch something over and over again, I sort of end up learning the lines from the program, because with me, I don't pick up on the language, I pick up on sort of like the sounds, which is why sometimes I've always been good at mimicry. So with this book, Jesus' Christmas Party, I just sort of learned it, and I chose that to read to my class, because I remember one of the lines is round the back. The innkeeper sort of got really annoyed with all these visitors. So like with the shepherds coming, he tells them, Mary and Joseph, round the back. And then when it comes to the wise men, we are three kings. We have come round the back. That was just one of my favorite moments. So yeah, so yeah, with reading, if I sort of like know it, and if I've heard it over and over again, then I'm okay with reading it, even despite my dyslexia. But yeah, that's just how I sort of did it.
Yeah, it sounds a good way to do it there, Mark. Because like you say, we all have our different processes, like how we do it. Like some here might like just to read out loud, and I think it's actually easier to read out loud than read in your head, because when you try not to, because I think we're doing ahead in class because we don't want to cause distraction to anyone else in the classroom, but it is very hard there. So guys, one last thing, like one last question before we kind of finish things up. I wanted to wrap things up on a happy note, I guess. In a way, a happy note. I hope it's a happy note. But like about like jobs with autism, like how do people find? I know it's very hard getting a job, but does anyone have find it easy? Or I know some people might not have a job at the moment, but do you think it's still it'd be interesting to see what the American side of things is to the UK as well. So I might start with America this time. So either Maddy or Jaqueline, you want to say maybe how having a job with autism is?
Jaqueline, do you want to go, or should I go first? I don't want to talk over you.
I'm not sure I have anything to say, so you could go.
Okay. So I am not yet employed officially, but I have interviewed and done internships and other sorts of volunteering that required a resume and interview, those kinds of things. So what I found was very helpful is particularly to work with someone that you trust, someone who might know a little thing or two about being able to get a job. And that's, to me, what really helped, because having a third-party opinion who may not be autistic really helps so that we can communicate what we want to say to those people when we submit our applications, and how we approach that scenario in the best way that we can, that's authentic to us, but at the same time allows for them to not be as, I guess, put off. And again, I'm saying like it's better that you be yourself rather than someone then having to conform to someone else's, you know, bullshit. I'm sorry. But it's kind of that way in life. The harsh reality is that us alone, we cannot change our political systems or the way that people value us. So in some aspects, sometimes we just need to put our head down and survive. And I'm not advocating that we shouldn't say something, because we definitely should. I think that we need to really emphasize change altogether. But I do think at the same time, the sad reality is we are still stuck in a broken world.
Yeah, I can put that better. We are stuck in a broken world. I think. Jaqueline?
So I was debating whether or not I wanted to say this, but I think it's important for me to just speak my opinion, and I do think it's actually really, really hard to get a job, and I'm just going to be blunt about it. I think it's going to be very hard for anyone with autism, no matter where you are on the spectrum, to land a full-time job. And I created my own job, so I do not have experience interviewing or applying for jobs, so I can't speak to that. But my best advice would be to stick in your special interest, because that is where you will excel. That's where you have a history. That's where you can prove that you can do the work and that you will stay super interested and engaging. So if my special interest is fashion, if I apply for fashion jobs and show them all of my work in fashion, I think I would be more likely to get hired. But the sad reality is there's going to be in-person or virtual interviews. And if you do not have great eye contact or communicative skills, that might be where you're lacking. So then try to vamp up where you are, where you excel. So if you excel doing work on the computer, if you just work on having a really great website or really great content, because or asking for a virtual interview if you feel better at home in like a safe space that you feel like wouldn't be as sensory overwhelming. Um, and then people are going to disagree with me on this, but I think in America, you should not disclose your disability until you sign the papers. Because I think there's going to be a lot of ableist people in the hiring process who will say no to you because. And I've experienced that with being approached by 5 different TV shows now to go on and do reality programs such as like Project Runway, or I'm not sure what the UK equivalents would be, but like designing shows or like interviews. And then once I get to the point where I feel comfortable enough, like third interview, to start talking about accommodations, they're suddenly going in a different direction. And I do not want to see other people go through that. So I think the best thing would be to have the protection of the law on your side, to fully get hired, do the best you can to get hired, and really put yourself and your personality to the best of your ability. I'm not saying you have to super mask or anything, but try to just do your best, whatever that means to you, and be in a safe place to disclose that. Because there could be unsafe places for you to disclose your disability, just like there's very unsafe. And I would say the same thing about your sexuality, or if you're transgender or anything like that. We need laws to protect these people. And autism is one of those things that I feel like needs to be protected.
Yeah, I completely agree. It definitely does need to be protected, and you've raised some really good points there, Jaqueline. Mark?
Yeah, I agree with what they both said, because especially with laws, because there is actually a document that does say that people with learning disabilities, such as autism, they have the same rights and choices as everyone else. And that means service providers, that's organizations that provide information, they have to make reasonable changes to the way information is provided so people like us can understand. But sometimes there's a feeling like they're bending this law, or worse, breaking it, because they need to realize that it's illegal to be prejudiced towards people with disabilities, and just sort of turn them away. Because with me, I want people to know that I'm autistic. So we're trying to get a job. It was difficult for me because some people said don't put your autistic on your CV, but I was like, no, I'm going to put it in my CV anyway because I want them to know I'm autistic. Because I think the thing is, you shouldn't try to hide your disability. Because think of it like with Elsa in Frozen, when she tried to hide her ice powers, that just made things worse and worse. Whereas if she did tell someone, things could have been different. And I always try and look at autism maybe like a gift rather than a curse, because it makes people unique and creative in different ways. Because I just mentioned Elsa with her ice powers. Once she was alone, she can build her palace without any problems. So that's just the way I see it. And I actually have a friend who works at my local job center. He knows that I'm a YouTuber, and he's actually subscribed to my channel, he's commented. He says, keep doing YouTube, Mark. Don't stop. Just keep doing, even if you can only upload one video a month, because it's what makes you happy. It's something you're good at. Because if I had to stop and try and find a proper job, I could end up being miserable just like I was at school. And all those skills that I learned about filmmaking, they'd probably just go to waste if I'm not working on YouTube anymore.
Yeah, I completely agree. Well, just keep doing YouTube, Mark. Finn.
Yes, so cool. In the grand scheme of things, am I still muted? No,
No,
that's fine,
no,
cool.
no.
In the grand scheme of things, I consider myself pretty lucky in terms of employment. Throughout my later years of school, going into college, we had specific sessions dedicated to CV/resume writing, interview practice, just getting a bit more of an idea of what to expect going through employment and applying for jobs and this kind of thing. And that definitely helped me, just because I could really get an idea beforehand of what things were going to be like. And I've gotten to a point now where I've already had a few jobs, and I consider myself like hugely lucky. And I do mostly have to have these sessions I had at school and college to thank for that, I feel like, just because it's really helped me come along. But I was thinking about it, and there was a job I applied for at the start of this year. I think it was a while ago now. And it kind of comes back to the idea of whether to put your disability on your CV or on your application, whether to disclose it or not. And up until that point, I was always thinking, why not? I've never had a problem with it before. It comes with its perks. I don't see anything wrong with putting it on there. So I did for this job I was applying for. My friend also already works at this place, and I was applying at the same time as another one of my friends was, both of these friends being neurotypical. So I got through with the job application. A week later, I heard back saying I didn't get an interview or anything. I was like, okay, this is fine, fair enough. It happens. And then I found out my friend that also applied heard back like a day after saying he got an interview. But then once again, I was like, this happens. Maybe he had a better application than me, or all of this kind of stuff. But then I decided to talk to my friend that was already working there. I was like, just out of interest, how many disabled people or neurodiverse people do you currently have working there? And he said, from what he knows, none at all. And that was like, oh, okay, so I see this all linking together now. It could be a complete coincidence, but it just seems like in their workplace, they have quite a few people, upwards of 50, probably even more. There's many, many different departments. And for none of these people to have a disability, or none that my friend was aware of, it's very much like, okay, well, here's the problem then. It seems like because they saw that I was autistic on my application form, that they straight away saw that. I was like, right, no, rejected. And it kind of made me rethink it. like, should I take it off? Should I wait until I've got a job in future to disclose it? But then I'm very much like, no, I'm going to keep it on there, because if it's a place that will discriminate against people with these disabilities, is it a place I want to be working at all? Not really. So like, if I didn't put autistic on the application form for this job and they employed me in the end, but then I found out there was no other neurodiverse people working there, I'd be like, okay, this isn't really a place I want to work for. You know, if I found out after the case that they wouldn't have wanted to employ me because I was autistic, it would just make me, you know, take everything back. So I feel like for me, it just feels like, you know, skipping out a step by putting it there on my application form. And under the Equality Act of 2010, which is meant to be anti-discrimination within the workplace or within employment, it's something that shouldn't be discriminated against at all, you know, equal opportunities. But yeah, it's just one thing that made me realize that, and it's made me rethink the whole thing. But yeah, I think up until then, I've been pretty lucky in the grand scheme of things.
Yeah, thank you for sharing, Finn. Yeah, because it's really important, like, to just think, maybe don't, like, kind of think, is that job right for you? Like, I liked what Jaqueline said about special interests. Have something that you're interested in, because you don't want to be depressed at a job that you don't like. But although that is very hard to get a job that you do like. But before I go on to Maddy, I just want to say maybe a situation that I had within work. Well, I had some work experience at a place that I didn't like, but I did it. I did it because I looked at it and no one there had any idea what autism was. So I explained what it was and everything, and I went. But I stopped going since the just before the pandemic hit. I stopped going, and then I was informed that they changed, because it was a meat factory. It was, so the meat factory, as you can imagine, is a big place. Lots going on in the meat factory, and then it changed. Like the meat factory changed its way of doing things. So it had more things about autism in a different kind of environment, where things have been doing maybe a bit easier to be like easier for an autistic person. So yeah, I agree. Says, before you go, because I know you have to go, we are just going to be round things up. Do you want to say anything before you leave?
Yeah, I was gonna say really about the jobs and all of that. I wanted to like talk about a little bit about my like job as well, because before I had my swimming job, I have had a little bit of success. I mean, I volunteered in most places. Then I had one job where I stayed for 3 months, absolute nightmare, because I didn't really get any support that I needed. But when I went to my swimming job, but that's after the pandemic, because I applied to loads of different places, and I even applied for the Harry Potter studios, the actual studios, to be a tour guide. And it was really interesting, because with the whole interview process, you have to go through an audition before you have to get through to an interview. Passed the audition, never, and I got to the interview. Never got the job, but I realized that with my swimming, it was really, really good. And bear in mind, really, I'm like on like some sort of like special thing. I won't say what it is really, just because I don't really want to share everything, but I'm on this like thing where it's under a contract that I have to work for 16 hours part-time, because that's the thing that you're supposed to have. So I needed to find some place that I could do that's part-time with under 16 hours, and the swimming job was perfect, because they were my local centre was going for like loads of like swimming teachers, and they were looking and looking and looking, and I applied after seeing the notice apply on a local disability fair that I went to, and it was really good, and it was open, and I enjoyed it, and I passed my level 1, and then it just went up and down, and I really had a mental breakdown, and I almost quit last week. I was up to the point where I almost quit because I just thought, oh God, what am I going to do? Because everything was falling apart. I was getting criticized all the time. I ended up crying a few times for over a month, really, after each session, even though it was an hour and a half that I have to assist. But then when my boss found out about that, because I told her everything, she had no idea. I told her about that, and now they're working together to make some reasonable adjustments to help me cope, and it has been working a little bit. And I mean, some adjustments cannot work, but I felt like during that time I thought I wasn't wanted, actually. But when I actually started doing the disability classes, I they were looking to do some anyway, because that was never done before in the sports centre, and they said that I brought the whole classes together, even though I'm not like qualified as a teacher yet. And then I think at that point, really, because I broke down in tears, because sometimes it was new feeling like that, sometimes it was happy, and then I just felt like, okay, this is the thing that they want me to say, and trying to make those reasonable adjustments was really good, and hopefully that will persuade me to continue passing my teaching qualification. But fingers crossed. But yeah, that's all I could say.
Thanks, Says. Yeah, I'm sorry that you like is how it's been for you for the last month, but it seems like you're acing it. Yeah. So if you have to go, Says, thank you for joining. I know it's been a while. We're just gonna we're all gonna be all done it soon. So thanks, Says. Maddy.
Yes, I was just going to, oh, bye. I was just going to add on to what other people are saying, in the sense that it is very oftentimes what I personally do. I do think it's good to be open about having autism and other things, but I think in terms of unless a resume calls for to list any sort of disabilities or list any things for accommodations, I think it's important to be aware that it could very well affect your decision in mentioning it. But then after that, after you're hired, after you're accepted, then I think that's definitely the time to say, because even if it is a place where that would have affected your decision, if they fire you now because you've already been accepted, that is illegal. That is overt discrimination, and that is legally, that's a legal offense. So in that way, it is, and that's something that I've often done, which is I wait until I get the acceptance or I get to that stage, and then afterwards I request accommodations. And if they don't provide me, because I have a legal diagnosis and a medical diagnosis that is considered discrimination, so I can't really do anything about that. And sometimes we need to put ourselves in places that we're not comfortable, and as horrible as that sounds, sometimes that's the only way that you can start to make a change. Sometimes you need to be the first person to put yourself in a situation and say, no, I'm not going to, I understand that they don't want me here, but I'm going to be here anyway. And like, I don't want to invalidate you in any way, Finn, because I do think you bring up a really good point. Yeah, and I just wanted to put that out there. And then in terms of things that I've figured out over the years when you're interviewing someone, when you're in that process, is a tip that I have for eye contact is looking at people's pupils and analyzing what their eye color, what their eye shape looks like. Do they have flex? Do they have this? And that gives the illusion that you're making regular eye contact with people.
Yeah.
So that's something I've been using, and ever since I've been using that, it works like a charm.
Yeah. All about the eye contact. Thanks, Maddy. Before we finish, I'm just going to go to each of you, and I'm going to ask if you have anything just to you want to say, just to finish. I'm gonna go to who am I gonna go to first? Mark, I'll go with you.
Well, I've always said this. If you are autistic, be proud to be autistic. I mean, try and focus on the positive sides of it.
Yeah, I completely agree with you, Mark. Thank you again for coming on. I know you're a frequent member of these kind of things I do, so thank you for being a part of it. Jaqueline?
I'm definitely proudly autistic, and I have like disabled in all of my publications on my website. It says disability advocate everywhere. But even on an even dating sense, that's something I deal with more than like a job sense. Men will say, "Oh, you don't look disabled. Oh, you must not really be disabled. Could you explain to me why there's a photo of you in a wheelchair or why you were a speaker?" And just to have it regularly questioned, it's something that I've realized that I'm not sure if it's different in the UK, but people have very specific conceived notions that are very negative surrounding autism, neurodivergence as a whole, and disability as a whole. So I don't want those I don't want those negative I don't want their perceptions to affect, so I'd rather them look at me, say I'm not disabled, and then me teach them about disability and an invisible illness and take it as a learning opportunity and an opportunity to teach them and really shatter their perception of disability. Be like, actually, this is why I'm disabled. It's valid. And hopefully the next person they come in contact with, they have a very different perception of. Because I think a lot of people don't encounter autism as much as they realize that they do. And their idea of it might be a nonverbal young male, which is the average diagnosis in at least in America. And that's very different than encountering an adult woman who is making eye contact with them and is trying to get a job or is trying to date. And I feel like I am very proud to be autistic, and I will tell anyone, especially if they ask me. But in the sense when you're applying for a job, the way that I wouldn't tell somebody that if I was transgender, if I was gay, I wouldn't tell them that I am disabled, just because I do realize how much blatant homophobia, transphobia, racism, and ableism there is in the United States, and I'm not sure how different it would be in the UK and if it feels like a safer space, if it feels safer to disclose these things. But here I need the law behind me, because even if it says that they can't use these factors in the hiring process, they are, and that's just how it is. And the big companies are now using it to their advantage, and they know that people with autism can actually help, and they're using even like tests like Myers-Briggs to figure out who processes information and placing them in roles that they'll actually really prevail with. But there's just very limited understanding of autism in the media. So these people's perceptions are very different than what the actuality is. So I still wouldn't feel any differently, but it's definitely a case by case basis. If it's something that you want to put on, you definitely can. I put it on everything. It's on my website, it's everywhere. It's just on the resume. It's something that I want the law behind because I just feel like they're going to judge me.
Yeah, you're very yeah, I think that's really good, because you want just things to happen, like to make a change about things as well. So I love that, because like over in the UK there are quite a lot of stigmas around certain things, like you're saying about transgender, like racism is quite a big one. It's so like you said before about being protected with autism, there's so many other things that should be protected as well in their own safe space. So Maddy,
Yes.
do you have anything to add or anything else you want to say to just finish?
Yeah, so I very much agree with what Jacqueline's saying, in the sense that definitely sometimes it is not safe to necessarily put that on your resume or put that in a professional setting, because that does unfortunately often lead to discrimination, whether it's overt or less overt, whether it's, for instance, I'm Asian, whether it's overtly racism, being called a slur or being spat on in the supermarket because they think that I have coronavirus because I'm Asian, to things like microaggressions and other things like that. So it does put you in a place of stigma, and it's not to say that we shouldn't be combating them, because we should, but I think that there does need to be a level of awareness. And unfortunately, the reality is we do live in a system where being a marginalized group is a danger, and that has been permitted by the government for years in almost every place. So it's important that, we continue to fight, but we also keep in mind personal safety awareness, and also just with knowing that there are other marginalized groups, having a collective mindset and really emphasizing solidarity.
Yeah, I completely agree. And yeah, and like we also mentioned in the last episode we did about like the like you said like about the Joe Biden saying the pandemic's over for people in America, and as we know, it's definitely not. Definitely in America and other places in the world, UK, because America is a very big place, and yeah, it's definitely not over for maybe for some people, but not for everyone. Finn?
Yeah, I mean, it's been a very thought-provoking conversation we've had, just in the last few minutes. I've been thinking about in future, am I going to disclose this information on future CVs applications, this kind of thing. And I was thinking, well, if they really cared that much, they could do the smallest bit of research, put my name into Google or whatever, and find out that I'm autistic. And if they're willing to go through that, then, it just shows that that's not a place I want to work. So if I don't put that on my application going forward, it could just help out, and as we've covered, stop the inequality at least being so blatant going into the future. So it's definitely something I'm gonna go away thinking about and reconsider going into the future. But yeah, just before we wrap up, I just want to say to anyone watching that we have covered some relatively sensitive topics, as well as the other stuff that you'd expect from a conversation like this. So we've covered stuff about ableism, inequality, we talked about like harassment and all of that kind of stuff. So if that is anything that people out there are experiencing or have experienced in the past, speak to someone you trust about it, someone you're comfortable talking to about it. Don't be scared to speak up, whether that's parent, other member of family, friends, a teacher. If as long as the teacher's not the person you're experiencing this with, even if that's like abuse or whatever, definitely speak up about it, because it's not something people should have to suffer and go through. But yeah,
Thanks, Finn. It's I like Finn said to anyone who's watching, like, yeah, just speak to a teacher, as Finn says, as long as it's not the one who's like abusing you or anything. Because like this episode, there has been lots of things that like people have shared that it would be very uncomfortable to share. So I say well done to everyone today who has shared something that maybe you didn't expect to share today. Because I don't think we all we thought we would speak about this kind of stuff in today's episode, but I'm glad you did, because I think it will help someone out there who maybe in silence, who's too scared. And it's all to do with confidence, because as we get older, we do build our confidence. So to anyone who who is experiencing that, like we've said, just tell someone, if it's a family member, if it's someone in your workplace, just someone you trust, because we should all have someone at least we trust in this broken world. Yeah, using the term broken world from Maddy earlier, because I like that term. So yeah, to anyone watching, listening, we hope you've enjoyed the episode, and thank you to everyone. I know it's probably longer than we expected, but we fitted it all in. Really good topics, and yeah, so thanks to Finn, Maddy, Jaqueline, Mark, and Sez, and yeah, thank you everyone, and goodbye.
Bye, everyone.
See ya.
Bye.